6. 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Does the charter require a specific format?
Nope. 5-year outlook of revenue versus expenses.
Just not any narratives or anything like that?
Well, I think it does ask you for your sets of goals and plans for the next 5 years, if I recall.
That's the items at the bottom of the
Bottom,
list.
the number 4.
I gotcha. Thank you.
So I guess to formalize it, or as a council, are we in agreement to use Richard's AIM tool and also integrate John's as well in the planning?
To the extent that John can
Can
integrate some of
integrate the
Mike's
capital.
analysis
Right.
and long-term. Nice thing about Mike's is you could change numbers and instantly see what would happen in
Yeah,
kind
I
of a
mean, I
quick
think
way.
there's a use for each of them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, I think they get, their scope gets bigger, and so John's is the most rudimentary as far as I could see, and then Mike's, and then Richard's.
But I agree with Becky, though. I mean, I found John's to be very useful when we met last
Yeah.
week. It gave a
Yeah.
real nice
Gives the-
overview and
the
perspective.
big
in a
picture.
a
Yeah.
breakdown.
Yep.
And
Okay.
It's just a matter of adding the debt service impact on that line in 2018, and you'll have the same effect. His bottom line red number will get bigger. But you just have to add a row that'll say, here's the beginning fund balance and how the available piece of it starts to diminish with your losses going forward. But he also doesn't have any assumptions in there, I don't think, for any revenue increases. So we have to look at that too.
We need to make sure very carefully include CBA increases and step increases and all that very carefully, the outcome of the recent arbitration or the likely outcome of the arbitration.
So we'll put together next week the, what we do every year is project the salaries for next year based on anything we know about bargaining agreement increases as well as steps, that kind of thing. So we can put those numbers together easily by department.
Great. Thank you, Richard.
With regard to retirees' healthcare costs, a reasonable assumption might then be to maintain the status quo right now until we know otherwise. Right now, we don't have, we may not know by the end of the year the outcome of the litigation.
And the status quo is,
Well, we're perpetuating some savings, but not the larger savings that at one time were incorporated into the budget. So Richard had to back off a little bit on
right,
those
So
presumed
that's-
savings about a year ago.
So that's whatever savings were derived from Humana, then Excelis.
Yeah, what we're currently deriving.
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, I guess the more conservative approach would be to assume that everybody moves back on the original plan, but imagine the outcome of the litigation.
Plan for that.
Or an agreement is gonna be some sort of balance. So I think the status quo is probably a reasonable place to look at if you agree.
Yeah, I do. I would rather not plan maybe this seems counterintuitive, I don't know. But I would rather not plan on every possible worst-case scenario because it might back us into a corner in making decisions that really don't turn out appropriate for the city's budget. So I think the status quo is,
Not optimistic nor pessimistic.
Right.
Just realistic, yeah.
It's the known.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Moving on, is there any public comment about any of the items on the agenda?
We're looking at you, Karen.
I just saw it as part of the agenda, and I was intrigued by this new idea, so I want to see if you guys did it.
Okay, hearing none. Moving on, our goals for our 5-year budget plan. On the agenda, you see 5 of them outlined: to increase the fund balance, to keep taxes as close to the cap as possible, wisely distribute funds across programs, improve longer-term financial stability, and increase revenue. Some of the ideas for increasing revenue include the having one-time increases, recurring increases, use of DOT property, and selling some city-owned property parcels.
I'd like to add, I'd like to have a sub-heading under recurring increases, and I want to have a conversation that I think has been a little bit laden with some, I don't know, past experiences or whatever, but where honest discussion of the marina and the revenues that we're generating from it now and what increased development could bring us over the long term, as well as possible marina at Wilcox. Because I know that Steve is saying that the cost of everything, the modification of the docks, the staffing, would still, could be met and still generate some revenue. So I think when we're talking about revenue increases, to me, something like that isn't just, I know Mike likes to talk about where we're getting money from in terms of ratepayers, you know, coming out of the water, sewer. But aside from that, that's just an increase on a burden for the taxpayers. I want to talk about possible revenue increases that not only give you recurring revenue, but also provide something of value to the city. And if we're gonna really slow down on marina development, then I think that we should have conversation with the public about that. Because I know when the Wilcox Dock project was proposed, there was a lot of interest, people calling up to bring their boats there. So I think that's something we should look at, and I would be happy to do some research on small marinas. You know, maybe we don't do the larger marina, but at least with Wilcox Dock, we've got those docks, and if we can meet the cost of it and make money off of it and provide something to the city, I think that needs to be a reasonable conversation.
Are there any other goals that I think we should identify in the plan, besides the
And
5 that we have listed?
Just a question, you know, fill me in on the city-owned parcels that we would sell.
That was Dale.
That was
That was
Dale
mine.
brought up.
Okay,
Well, let's back up to the DOT property.
okay.
Because that's what, 12 to 17 acres, I've never heard. And there was some discussion, and there's been discussion about,
Whereabouts are you talking about?
it's over on, it's behind the plaza.
Yeah,
Beaumont,
okay,
Beaumont,
same
over-
one I'm thinking
Not
of,
off
all
of
right.
Beaumont.
Right,
With the big mounds of sand.
Is it South
Yeah.
Peru?
It's on
Peru
South
Street.
Peru,
right, it's
yeah.
state-owned,
Whitman Avenue.
and
Right.
Yeah.
Avenue, Eastern Street.
Right.
so where is the discussion with that? I mean, is there a discussion with it?
We had, you're in the teleconference of it, we had a discussion with DOT and the Financial Resources Board to see if we could broker some sort of a swap where we could have our DPW go down to that site and they move up to the site we're currently paying municipal taxes on in the town. And they didn't, would it be fair to say they weren't all that keen on our, how wonderful we thought?
Being polite.
So as you know, part of the DRI could potentially be redeveloping this area down here, so that means finding potentially another place for MLD at some point. So MLD and DPW, and I've been looking around at different other locations that MLD would kind of sponsor and find a location they could service, but would be big enough also for DPW, and then they could co-locate motor pools and that kind of stuff at some point. And you've looked at jointly 2 or 3 different places, probably have another 2 or 3 ideas of other potential things. I think those are gonna be bigger discussions, including discussions of what we all do with the Ruger Street location, the former Norco site and the compost plant.
Okay,
Because there has been previous discussion on that as well.
So I'd say those are continuing discussions, but not on the back burner. I think they're putting a lot of thought into this, not too much energy into it yet, but a lot of thought into various opportunities to try to minimize our long-term tax obligations to other jurisdictions.
But I know that Norco piece of property is very valuable to the DPW as far as holding your supplies and.
Landfill, actually, dump site is more important, but the actual, not the compost plant, but the north facility. Because there's no current dump site in the city, that we own. The only other one would be the adjacent one that Onstead has. Down there.
Wasn't it the Norco land that was and I'm wondering where this went, the proposed site for the silt removal from the dam?
Yes.
That discussion is continuing, yep, that's in the works still. And we maybe get some revenue, good revenue
That
from
would be,
that
yeah.
in maybe a year's time. That's somewhat beyond our control because that's a schedule dictated by the DEC and their desires with the Imperial Dam.
Right, and where is that?
We've had discussions for that, it's still in their court. We're in agreement of working something out with them. They're doing the engineering and all their stuff. So we hope to hear back from them soon. When did we discuss that with them? Probably about 2 to 3 months ago.
Was that long ago? Didn't you go?
What's that?
Didn't you attend that meeting?
DEC?
I thought you were talking, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about negotiations with the town about water.
No, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah,
No.
okay.
This is about the dam, the silt behind the dam with the removal.
Oh, okay.
That it would be cheaper for them to truck it to Norco. What was it? Over $1 million
Mhm.
that we would gain as revenue from that.
Wow.
And it would offer some fill in an area that was previously mined out, so it
Right.
could make it a property perhaps even more usable, solve some wetlands problems potentially with it, and they would help take care of the wetlands problem, because they could create some wetlands, replace the wetlands they would fill in our property, so it seems like a real win-win, and we're still quite hopeful and optimistic that'll
So-
happen.
You know, is there a systematic way we could target this goal? I don't know exactly what form that system would take, but just to, you know, instead of just making it part of the plan, really get some action. Obviously the action's taking place, but.
But the
And
plan
not-
has to be done in 3 weeks. How much
Yeah, I mean,
action, how much action
that can
can
be
you
part of
have
our
in 3
stated
weeks?
goal, but then to implement that goal, you
Yeah.
have a targeted,
point.
I don't know, task force
No,
or
I
whatever.
think you're right, because it can't be done for this,
Yeah.
things that we're talking about. I mean, these require further discussion, and they come up at certain times,
But they can be identified.
you know, so we can put it on a
Flow chart.
strategic, well, I was thinking
Yeah,
of strategic
goals thing.
planning.
An
and
action,
then
a strategic
items,
plan.
you know, as we come to them. But for now, I mean, that's where the revenue side is a little bit difficult, because we can't say, yeah, we're definitely gonna get this.
Yeah.
You know, so we can't really plug those numbers into any spreadsheet. We can't say, yep. I mean, the only thing that we can plug in is like when Sylvia increased fees, then we knew that was gonna happen, so we got
Right.
nothing else that's for certain.
That's
You
budgeting
make the
anyway,
goal
projection-
and then you
projection.
strategically figure out how you're
Right.
gonna implement that goal,
I- and
or,
I-
you know, carry
okay,
out that
so
goal.
I think the place that revenue has a place is in the narrative part of what we're doing, that, you know, we can, because I'm still trying to parse out how we do this plan and put numbers in and then adhere to it. And you guys know I feel very strongly about not being chained to this when we have to make decisions. But the other things.
It's a plan.
Yeah, well, the narrative part can be, we're gonna try to do all these things, right? We're gonna look at ways of increasing the fund balance, somehow we gotta prioritize these goals.
And go to La La Land at the same time.
Yeah, but then we have the narrative piece that says, okay, we are looking for more than just cutting, slicing, taxing.
Right.
We're actually, we have possibilities, and as you said, not just bring them up once in a while when somebody
Right.
thinks of them, but we actually have an action plan. We're gonna address this, we're gonna have conversations about this. we're gonna make decisions, so, you know, some
And a
things are out of
timetable.
control.
Yeah, and set a timetable for it.
Yeah, yeah. And
I
some,
encourage you to do that, and if you want to put in a 2 or 3 or 5 year plan, ideas with those properties, I say those properties because we actually have a couple of properties, right, the compost and the Norco. We're the major property owner in that area of the town and the city that are contiguous.
right,
So we should develop a scenario and a plan for what we want to do with that area. And I think that could share in some expenses if we at some just point decide to use that property to co-locate facilities, or we could enhance revenues in some other way, in a significant way. And so I think that's pretty strategic, and that's really what your 5-year plan is about, is to set forward some strategies over the next few years that you want to see the city pursue. Meanwhile, we'll continue working on the finances and legalities and engineering of these. But if you adopt that kind of vision, I think that'd be very appropriate for this.
is
Is there
there,
other, oh,
no, go ahead.
is there other property besides that parcel up there?
That for a co-location or for
No, that,
areas of-
other city-owned properties that,
Oh, there's a ton of it. Of city-owned properties, we own a lot of property.
You know, other areas that I know these individuals looked at is they went out and took a trip to Imperial Mill. There's some area associated with that. Adjoining that, as a matter of fact, an area that the city was once planning to develop about 12 or 15 years ago that they built foundations for. They're going to build, what were they going to build there? Do you recall?
It's an incubator building, but it's
Yeah.
for a new business. They went as far as to get a foundation in the ground, but
Is that
Yeah.
behind the, what's the name of that little small building before you get down to?
Left electrical plant's office off Main.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Go down the end of Underwood Avenue, and
Yes.
that field to the left.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
You can see it. yeah.
okay.
Is there any opportunity to do something with the town up by Norco? I think that when there was an opportunity that came and.
Hydroponic tomatoes?
Yes, and we talked about annexation, didn't we?
Yes, we
Yep.
did.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so if there's any possibilities of working with the town.
But then on the other hand, you know, there's, you don't want to preclude the opportunity to get some tax revenue from that either. You know, I mean, I'm not sure what's
No,
involved in
yeah.
annexation, but
but I think we
we've
also
got
have
so
to
little
look,
land, we don't want to give the farm away, you
but I
know?
think we also have to look at if there's that potential revenue for the silt, as well as serving the needs of our DPW, that I would advocate certainly not selling off the entire parcel, but
Right.
keep
It's
that in mind,
Yeah, but
that there's
annexation
potential.
would be us taking land
Right.
from the town.
I think there was
Yeah.
15 acres of interest. Annexation would probably be history in the making in New York State from when we looked at it
Oh,
before.
yeah, it's the other way around.
Yes, yes.
You know, the Saranac River Trail, their next phase plans to go right up through there, right across our property to the interstate. Right up
Yes, the blue trails.
over there, along the blue trails.
Well, I'm just gonna make a suggestion though, I mean, of course, we're brainstorming and that's natural, but in a way, with the timetable being so tight, I feel like if we can agree that we're gonna task the fleshing out or whatever goals to other committees or whatever, that we should go forward, and then we gotta be able to think about what we're gonna do, you know, what are the details of our
Okay.
strategic 5-year plan.
All right, with that being said, there are a couple of items on the budget that are less concrete than others. Very, very specifically, increasing the fund balance means that we find ways to have that surplus that increases fund balance. Keeping taxes as close to the cap as possible that's the same instrument that we use. We gotta make sure that we're not spending money. When we talk about wisely distributing funds across programs, that's what
a
is the
given.
wisdom?
Right, it is a
You know,
given.
what does that mean? Is that fairness? Does that mean program analysis? One department needs more money or more staffing. Those become those have an element of subjectivity to them, they really do. So I think the first two really, in my opinion, are the guideposts for plugging numbers into those spreadsheets. And those other two, improve long-term financial stability, I think that's a conclusion of all those budget aims, to keep get close to the tax cap, to budget wisely, to increase the fund balance, increase revenue. The outcome is then we have improved long-term financial stability. So if we can prioritize the first two for the next couple of meetings, just get very pragmatic
Right.
without being ridiculous, in terms
Well,
of
and if
swords
there
out.
are, I mean, I think that the sentiment behind the wisely distribute funds is also to make, if there are cuts to be made, to be equitable about dispersing those cuts across.
Right. Although equity is a guiding factor to me when the field is level.
Right.
And the field isn't level. I mean, some departments need more operational money than others do.
Sure.
And some departments have certain time periods when they are mostly needed. Do you know what I mean? So I think, to me, equity has to go towards salaries. That's certainly an issue, but it's equity and need, I think, balance. But it's true.
Balancing equity and need. Okay.
It's true that, but I think that the departments have already made substantial inroads in the wise distribution, because everybody is making cuts. Everybody is saying, we're going to give this up, and Mike giving up his fluff kind of thing. Sorry I use that term, because I always have hated it, but
Everybody knows what it means anyway. We know that it doesn't mean what.
that you're putting in your pocket.
Right.
It's all right, Ross.
Just.
I'm the one who made the jab.
Yeah,
But he got me earlier this evening, so he was owed
Yeah.
that.
So,
I see the increase in revenue being really all narrative for the most part.
Yeah, because we don't have numbers.
Right.
right. But there had been some discussion a couple of months ago about whether we should revisit capital expenditures even for this year.
Yes.
So is that still on the table?
I think that's exactly where the numbers come from. Because we want to increase the fund balance and keep taxes close to the gap as possible. That's where we look at the numbers and say,
Right.
we can't have it all.
So then, like a step by step, I mean, should we as a group then kind of figure out our action plan for how we're gonna accomplish this, or is the finance committee doing that, or what?
I don't think we
yeah.
don't meet again
Yeah.
until this is due. So I think that, because we meet, don't we meet the first, I don't know. I
First
just joined.
Monday.
Oh, the finance committee does it,
Yeah.
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 So, you wanna brainstorm some this is what we're gonna do next week and da.
So we do just this for the next 3 weeks or whatever it is.
Right, but I mean, do you wanna name some topics so that we
How
can prepare?
about we take up the first tool? We'll ask John to modify it to add the
Okay.
debt service. What else, Richard, did you say needed about it? Debt service?
Capital revenue increases.
The debt service is the capital
Right.
expenditure impact.
Did you say something else, though?
Well,
I
there
don't
was,
think he has a,
Oh, you didn't have a revenue thing.
right.
he doesn't have any revenue projections as far as increases.
Right, and we don't have any
Estimates.
projections.
Right, those are
Well,
assumptions.
doesn't Mike say?
He also doesn't have a fund balance calculation going forward year over year.
All right.
Could
so
I
we're gonna-
recommend we worry a little bit less about the fund balance, this year's stuff, because it's really a budgeting exercise. You're thinking of a 5-year plan, so you really need to be making sure you're dealing with the structural issues, how the long-term revenue and the long-term expenses are balancing out. And I think if you do that well, I think then you're going to end up with a little bit more building up that fund balance over time. But if you focus too much on the fund balance, you can be focusing too much on the today. we've got to really get the long-term picture more aligned.
The $2
We're about
million
$1 million or two
structural.
out of whack for that.
So what you're are you saying that really the only thing that we've got control over in that tool is the debt service and the capital projects?
Well, already in the next 6 or 8 months, we're working really hard to, expand revenue for this year and decrease expenses for this year in every single conceivable way, including bringing up ideas to you about, do we really need this, do we really need that, et cetera. I think we need help in guiding what's gonna happen next year and the year after and the year after that, and make sure we're not just doing a series of one-year budgets, but really have a 5-year structural budget in mind. And if we think we do that well, I bet you all those other pieces start falling into place. Then every year, what we need to do is make sure we save a little bit more than we were hoping to save. We do a little bit better each year in expenses, and each time we do that, we see that fund balance kind of building itself up slowly. If you build a little cushion into the structural revenue versus structural expenses to build that fund balance up, that's good too. But I'd hate to get distracted too much on the immediate when we really have to send a strong signal out for which direction we need to move the ship.
So practically, when we sit down with that tool, are you saying that structurally we just basically plug in a reduction in expenses every year for 5 years?
I think that's the first start. I think
And an
it'd be
increase
more
in
helpful
revenue,
to look
projected
not even
increase
at
in revenue
next
and how we're gonna
year,
get there.
but 2 years down the road, and see how you're more aligning something 2 years from down the road, and then start understanding what the implications are, what are we gonna have to do to get to that point. And then we start looking more deeply into the expenses and do the divisions between the departments, et cetera. But I think we need to have approximately where we're going before we can really do that. Otherwise,
Would that be all that we would need to, I don't want to say all,
Well,
but
it'd be a
basically,
really good start for
that's
this.
for this,
time, yeah.
for
That could be
June?
the
Because you're doing the
immediate.
5-year plan, then we still have some time to come up with a year budget for the mayor's budget in October, right? So, but now we've got some guidelines for what we
Okay.
need to fix
Where
that
we're
in
headed.
too.
Well, that
We're
takes
heading.
some of the weight off of trying to map out every single
Yeah.
individual item.
Right.
Yeah.
How
Do you
many-
agree, Richard? What's your sense of this?
Well, my recommendation would be that, time is of the essence, obviously. You got 3 weeks to put these set of numbers together, and you only have 6 months until you need a new budget for next year. So, what are we gonna do about, just the debt service increase I see coming for next year that requires an 8% tax increase? Focusing just on that, and that, exhausts our available fund balance, because I put reasonable numbers in, and 17 comes out of balance, because we have a balanced budget. About 18, we lose $640,000 because of the debt service increase and just minor increases in expenses, and assuming a 2% tax increase, we still have a $630,000 loss. So I think you've got to look carefully at, by putting these numbers together, you got to look carefully at what the impact of what we've already decided to do. Like I've used in these numbers, the capital project expenditure plan that you approved last January,
Yeah.
5 years out.
So,
And if those are numbers that you're gonna follow, because we have to do this improvement, that improvement, buy this equipment, that equipment, they're in there and their impact is already being felt. And I think it's important, not to focus on trying to build fund balance, but not to have negative numbers come out of this.
Right.
Because our numbers are going negative in 2018 right away. Available fund balance or unrestricted is minus 18,000. By 2019, it's 1,168,000 negative. By 2020, it's 2.8 million negative. And
That
by
doesn't include the
2021
firefighters yet, does it? Firefighters arbitration,
I haven't put those numbers in here yet.
right?
And by 2020, it's $4.9 million negative. So.
okay, so help us then.
There's some big things to decide.
Help
on.
us get a system down then. So would it make sense to do as the mayor suggested, to do like the 2-year forecast and try to build in some workable figures to work for it, and then work back, because we've got our goal set for 2 years ahead, and then work back and see what we need to do for next year. Does that make sense?
I think when you say work back, we need, what Richard's saying is we gotta work back into 2017 because
Right.
we have approved the
That's
capital
what I mean.
projects
That's what I'm saying.
that are increasing it by $640,000
Right.
next year.
Yeah, I'm already
So
trying to
we have to
measure
tackle,
the impact of 2018 in these numbers, and it's bleak.
right.
Say, you know, the best about it.
But at least we have then, if we try to take the 2-year mark, and then eventually we'll be able to extrapolate forward from that, if I'm thinking right.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
And then go back, and then we're doing the preparation for the 2018 budget and reevaluating the capital expense, all those variables that you just mentioned, and figuring out a plan of action for that.
I think if you're gonna adjust what's being spent for capital, you gotta look at that right away.
Mhm.
Those
Okay.
projects are moving along right now.
Yep,
And how do you stop them?
okay. You would
Well,
say,
I mean,
you would say we're
honestly,
hemorrhaging.
It has to be a question about, you know, one of the POs, and it's like, yeah, unfortunately, the design work in the firehouse on South Platt Street is already committed for 12 grand.
But what, somebody tell me, we approved a capital plan, so now we want to stop elements of the capital plan, and what does that entail? Do we,
We have to reevaluate.
but what puts a stop to it, just because
Well-
6 of us say, hey, stop?
Yeah, you just
Yeah.
through a resolution.
So we need a
you can-
resolution.
Yeah,
And we've had this conversation before.
Yes, we have.
yeah. So, I mean,
You gotta go back and look.
you gotta go back and reevaluate and see what you can really afford and reprioritize according to that.
Well, then I guess what Richard is saying, that's what we do at the budget meeting next
Very
week.
first one, okay.
I mean, I'm not telling us what to do, but if that's what you're
No,
saying, has
yeah.
to be done now. Because then the following week is when the resolution will go on the table to put a halt to any capital projects.
Yeah, and then you're saying, as a result of making those decisions, you can get a better grip on the debt service and then make your projections forward for
Yeah, right now,
that.
the predicament I'm in is that I have to get not budget resolutions, bond resolutions put together.
Right,
To get them before you, so you can approve, and you can get them to the bond council so you can borrow money. Because right now, it looks like we have to borrow about almost $14 million at the end of this year. All funds included. General fund's about 10
Okay.
million, 9 of that. I don't know that we're gonna reduce it that much, because which projects are you willing to axe? Which ones
Well, and we're gonna have
can
to
we
ask
stop at this point?
everyone who
That's
has a
right.
capital project approved already to come and give their reasons why it should be preserved.
or offer suggestions about what can be delayed. I mean, maybe that's the first
Yes.
request.
Yeah, I'd do
Yeah.
that. Before I alarmed all the department heads, there's some that are no-brainers, they have CHIPS money associated with it. I
Yeah.
think you're probably.
Yeah,
gonna
if it
continue
doesn't
like
have an
rain, et
impact on the
cetera.
debt
I'm
service.
talking about the ones that are increasing the debt service, mostly in
Right.
the general fund, because that's where the tax impact is. There's others that are impacting water and sewer, which I've included in the numbers too. And that, of course, makes for more pressure on those funds to have rate increases.
But that's a separate issue. It's a separate issue because we've already talked to John and he's putting together a package to talk about rate increases to increase the water fund.
And he's also talked about juggling his maintenance schedule and getting an updated report to see if really we need to spend $900,000 here or 20 million there, et cetera. He's rejigging right now, so I think he'd be one, if you were to ask a few department heads to come and talk with you about reevaluate plans, he'd be one that could have something to say. I know the chief is talking, we've been talking about the fire truck and the addition to the fire hall. You brought that up before. Those conversations are ongoing. So there might be just 2 or 3 really key department heads you might want to sit down and spend some time with. And that probably is realistic, that what you could actually do in a meeting that way too, and have some really meaningful conversations over 3 or 4 items that you could likely cancel this year and delay to a future year, rather than look at the entire list and department by
Right,
department.
I mean, we know we gotta do the streets,
Right, Lorraine's already
yeah,
practically
we've-
started.
Yeah.
Already.
Maine is on.
And that's Lorena's chips anyway.
Yeah.
And then
And we've
the,
got a grant coming in for the
So
Main
what if
Street,
we work
I
together
hope.
in the next couple of days and prioritize the capital plan to see those things that we do have some discretion to bring to you and ask for more guidance?
and that impact the general fund.
How far out can we project salary increases? Where are we at right now? with-
Well, we can project well, there, you know, we're in negotiations with a few unions right now.
Okay.
Firefighters, MLDs coming up and police. But the other, it asked me, we can project that out a few years.
So the others that you
Until
mentioned,
when,
they're good until the end of this year?
Karen?
PD needs,
No,
I think
We just
was
did ask them.
already
Yeah.
over, it's in the process of getting renewed. Firefighters, you know the situation, MLD's coming up for expiration.
Okay.
Was that a 3-year contract for us?
See, I don't know anymore.
Okay.
The library is a separate
Aspen
contract.
next year.
Next year?
Okay.
Is it? Ooh. So the
Wow.
projection
And,
of those salaries is.
And there's things strategically we're gonna wanna talk about. I sent this to Richard and Josh, we're doing some numbers. Did you know if we go and hire, just use an example, a 22-year-old who's gonna work with us for say 20 years, you know, a couple of our unions have 20 years and you can retire. And then they're gonna be on our retirees medical for, that brings up 42 to 65, 23 more years on our retirees medical. And then the life expectancy for a 22-year-old worker right now is 82 years, so they're on our medical and Medicare from 65 to 82. The total cost that we should be imputing in their salary today to cover for their next 20 years of service to pay for those obligations in the future years in net present value cost per year is between $28,000 and $62,000 per year just for retirees medical. I mean, these are huge numbers. These are numbers that are quite a bit larger than the salaries we pay a lot of individuals.
I guess we shouldn't be hiring anybody who's 22. We should just hire
Only 65-year-olds.
Yeah. We'll do
55, 60.
the opposite to age discrimination.
We'll set a precedent,
We'll be seen as innovative.
right?
Yeah.
Totally.
I know that probably wouldn't work for public works, but.
Okay,
or
are
fire,
there any other
police.
budgetary or financial items that the council would like to discuss?
So we've got our homework for next week.
Yes, we do. Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next week we'll come back with a report prioritizing some of the capital projects then. We'll take a look at that.
Oh, you guys are great. There's something to be said for the collective